Are you tired of living your life in the mundane, feeling like you're searching for something more and you never find the answers? Well, friend, Jesus was the answer for me, and I know He can be for you too. He is rest, He is peace, He is the well that never runs dry. He has given us His word as a tool to navigate this life with Jesus by our side and to find that everlasting peace that we've been looking for in Him. So I pray today that you are encouraged as we take the leap into this week's episode and dive into Heaven's Well together. Welcome, friend. Hello and welcome to another episode of Heaven's Well podcast. I am your host, Brooke Burrow. Today we have a special guest with us. I connected with her through my online business, and she is just an incredible human. She has an incredible story to share with us, so we're going to dive in. So today we have Audrey with us. So welcome, Audrey. We are so happy that you are here. I'm excited to hear your story and just dive into getting to know you a little bit better. So tell me about just the way God is moving in your life right now, just what your biggest aha moment that you've had with Him lately and kind of what He's been teaching you through that.
I guess for me right now, I've been going through a transition stage. I've been married 22 years, almost 23, and I have two teenage sons, and basically they both moved out I guess now it's been about 2 months. So it's been this like weird transition stage of like just being me and my husband and like being an empty nester. So it's kind of weird. I just feel like God's got me in a place of like really just focusing on myself and really just kind of trying to like figure out who I am and like the things that I enjoy and just all of that, because it kind of gets lost in motherhood, as you probably know, kind of like, you know, you're doing all the things mom, and then it's kind of like you just kind of have to figure out what you like and who you are. So that's kind of where I'm at. Big thing in my life right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's hard because we go through these transitions and it's like everything changes, and your identity for so long was probably in your kids and raising your kids, and that's so consuming when you are a parent, and it's so consuming to, take care of these little humans, and your whole day is structured around them and what they need to have done and the appointments that they need to have and the food that they need to eat and the clothes that they need cleaned and all of the above.
Yeah.
And then we don't focus on us. And it's like, and then they grow up and we're like, okay, well, there's still a me here somewhere. We got to try and find that again. So yeah, that's totally relatable.
Yeah.
So do you think that in this new season that you're walking into, do you feel like there is things that you're having to kind of overcome and like kind of go through as you're entering this new season and trying to kind of like find your identity again?
Yeah. I know I had shared before, like I have always kind of struggled with like anxiety and depression and all the things like that. For me, I think I kind of hid a lot of that and taking care of my kids and like having that. I mean, I'm definitely better than I used to be. When I first had kids, it was like crazy that I like had super anxiety and depression just because I was like trying to figure all that out. And then as I've kind of gone through the years, like, I've I've basically been on medication. I've done all the things, but I really decided that I was going to take it to the Lord probably about 5 years ago now. And I really just kind of like left it with Him and said, I don't want to carry this burden. I just want you to hold it and not me to have to think about it. So that's been totally freeing for me in that. But as my kids have kind of like walked that journey out, I find myself kind of like not going back to that necessarily, but like just feeling like, okay, now what is it? I need to focus on what it is that I have, like what He has for me, So, so just trying to find that balance and just give it all over to Him, continuously every day. Like it's an everyday battle of like, okay, here it is. That's basically what I'm going through right now, is more of that type of a journey. So it's good. I'm not like, I don't struggle. It's just, when I do start to feel those anxious thoughts, I literally just have to say, okay, I'm giving this back to you. So it's a constant
absolutely.
process, but.
And it's daily. I mean, and I think it is for all of us, even those who are completely on fire for the Lord. We still have things that happen in our day that try and sway us, and that affect us. And we have to continue taking that to Him. But I think that's the beauty too in, forming a relationship with Him and growing it and nurturing it, is it gets easier to do that. And you get so much more reliant on that he will show up, that he is going to come through for this, even if it is small, even if it is as small as I'm just not feeling good about this, or I feel very anxious about this. And he does step in if we are willing to go to him, and ask. So as somebody who has raised kids, and now you are in this new season of life, for those of us who do have littles at home and are still very much in the thick of it, what is your advice for those moments for everybody who does feel those high moments of anxiety, when the kids are just totally stressing you out and you feel like you haven't had a moment to yourself in weeks, and you're trying to stay, focused on Jesus and doing the right thing, but every part of your flesh wants to scream and run and hide? How did you cope with that as a Christian and as a woman of faith?
I really dug into my community of like women at my church and people that I really felt close to, and I prayed with them. I had, I did a lot of Bible studies. I basically spent a lot of time talking those feelings out.
Absolutely. Community is so important. I would not be who I am without my village. I am a firm believer in like find your people and lean on them and find faith-filled people. I have a couple of friends in my life, and if I'm not talking to them on a consistent basis, it's like my axis is off, and it's all like from not that they are my God, by no means. I don't rely on them for that, but they keep me grounded, and they keep me, where I need to be mentally, and saying like, hey, it's okay. You're not feeling alone in these feelings, and speaking to them and hearing other people's struggles and hearing that other people go through the same things you're going through. It gives you that sense of I'm not alone in this, and I'm not crazy in this, and this is just part of life. And then having faith-filled friendships then also helps you recognize like, hey, that's an attack of the enemy on your life, and like we need to pray over that if that's what it is, or hey, we need to intercede for you in this situation, or we need to pray for you in this situation. And having that is so important. And I never really realized the importance of it. And, that we talk about church and how important church is to go to have that community. And so many people have been burned by the church that so many people have walked away from it. And it's so sad because the love of Jesus is so far from that hard religion that so many churches teach these days. And he just loves us, so much, and he cares about us, and he wants that relationship with us. And having church gives you that community, but it's important too that if you aren't in church, to find it outside of that, and to find people that you can rely on in that way and help grow with and help nurture your relationship. I feel like for most of us, he puts us in a season of isolation for a time, and he's like, it's just going to be us. Like, you don't need to rely on anybody else. You don't need to be getting advice from anybody else. But then there is a season for community, and it talks about that in the Bible. And there's a season for discipleship, and all of those things. And it's so important, and it's so life-giving, and like I said, knowing that you're not alone in those things, there's power to it for sure. So in this next season that you're walking into, this exciting new time, and kind of being an empty nester and all of the above, what do you have any hopes and dreams that you hope to see come to pass? Do you have anything that you're excited about, just having the time freedom to do these things for yourself and finding kind of that identity again?
Yeah, I mean, for me right now, it's just focusing on, we've owned a business for a long time, and so that kind of got a little bit dried up, I guess you could call it. So I've just been kind of now just searching exactly what it is that I want to do to make an income and all of that. So I think all of these transitions at once are pretty overwhelming, like it can be. So that's why I just continuously like go to him and just seek him, because it's like, I want to do what he wants me to do, really,
Well, and I think he does that to a lot of us, where I've been through a season like that recently myself, and it was, everything was going really great. And then it was almost like I prayed I want to be tried by fire, purify me. I prayed that prayer, and I wanted him to, rebuild my life in a way that glorified him 100%. And boy, I tell you, he'll do it. And it's scary and it's overwhelming, because he comes in and he's like, okay, well, if you're serious about this, then we're going to do it. And, stripped everything that was comfortable for me and took away everything that was in my comfort zone. And it was to show me how much I only needed him, and that, yes, all of these things have been feeding my comfortability, or however you want to say it, for so long. And that's where I felt, my contentment. But it's all comes from him. It all stems from him. And when he's at the center of it, it's so much better than anything I could have came up with anyways, or anything that I could have done in my own power. And so seeing that now, kind of coming out of that season, and I'm not fully out of it by no means, but I am slowly, I feel like, kind of coming out of it and seeing it for what it was. I'm so thankful for it, because as hard as that was, and as hard as it has been to fully trust him in this process and to say, like, full surrender, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm here for it, and we're just going to do it, and I'm going to trust that your plans are going to fulfill through it. I'm now seeing the fruit of all of that, and it's so beautiful. And it not only has put me into a place in my life where I needed to be, but it's also formed me into the person I needed to be in this season of my life. And it was, my prayers through the season are always, Lord, when's the blessing coming? If you could just take this, if you could just fix this, if you could just do this. And it was, for so long, that was my prayer. And now it's like, those things don't really matter, because I already know you have those things taken care of. It's like, Lord, purify me. Like, Lord, lead me today. Help me hear your voice, guide me, work on my character even more, help form me even more. And all the other materialistic stuff that used to be my cries out to the Lord are now taken care of, even though they aren't. But I don't worry about them anymore, because I know that they're taken care of, even when I'm not seeing it in front of me. And I wasn't at that place 6 months ago mentally, and I was still stressed, and I was still worried, and I was still doubting him. Even though I knew he could show up, I still had that doubt in the back of my mind. And so there's so much power in being in that season, and walking through that, and knowing he is doing something, and he is working, and he is moving, and it may be uncomfortable for me now, but it's going to be worth it in the end. And it's going to come to pass in the best way possible. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited to see just all that he does in you, and how he moves and how he shows up. It's going to be so exciting.
Yeah. I've been through seasons like this before, of like uncertainty and not, sure. And he like always shows up. Like, it's always like, okay, like I'm like freaking out, that's my nature is first freak out and get like anxious and have all these like crazy thoughts. And then later I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like he totally like did all that. Like that was all him. Like it wasn't me. I had no, like I see it for what it is. And I'm like, it's cool. Like, I know it's hard in the moment. Like, it's like, okay, what is it that you want? And you're always like constantly seeking him. Like, what is it that you want? You're praying that prayer over and over again of like, what is it that you want? And I think sometimes it just in the silence, because that's kind of where I'm at, is I feel like in the silence, that's where it can get to be, depression, anxiety, all those things can kind of like creep back in. But that's where I've had to learn over the years. I mean, like I'm 47. So like I've had to learn over the years that like I have to give it over to him, if it's even 6 times a day, 10 times a day, whatever it is, like I have to do that. And if I don't, then that can just creep in and the enemy can just literally attack. And I mean, I've been there. I've been through times of like serious lows and all of that. And it's like, I have to tell myself, no, that's not from God. That's from the enemy, So I think it's like knowing the difference and knowing all those things to really just to really like to be in perspective, because it's like it can eat you up, if you don't really if you let it really. So
well, I love that. And you're right. The isolation is how it starts. And it normally starts with sin. It's normally we are tempted to do something, we do that thing, and then we instantly isolate. And then that little bit of isolation starts with tempting thoughts on, well, I can't believe you did that. If you did that, then like, oh, we're just taking 2 steps back. We might as well go ahead and go do this too. And then we end up laying in bed for 8 hours watching Netflix all day long because we've already messed up once. What's it going to do? We just need to rest. And then that turns into a week of negative thoughts and procrastination and limiting beliefs and doubts and anxiety. And then all of a sudden we're like, hold on. What is happening? And when you do snap out of it and like that veil is torn, it's so clear. But I think sometimes God allows us to go through those little pockets of our lives to show us how the enemy does work. Because if I would have never had gone through any of those moments of isolation and moments of doubt, I would have never learned the enemy's tactics. And I would have never learned how to recognize when that does start to happen in me, and not only in me, but in my kids, because I notice it in them too. And they'll go through phases where they're sucked into social media all day long. And then they come out and they are just in terrible moods and they are mean. And it's not them. It's what they're consuming and what they're
Yeah.
telling themselves and what they're listening to. And then that's affecting them. And so,
Yeah.
and it goes the same for us. And it's looking back on different seasons of my life, I kind of laugh at myself, and I want to just go back and hug myself, because I'm like, it wasn't as bad as you thought it was. Like, it really wasn't that deep, but it feels that deep when you're in it, because the lies of the devil scream, and they scream so loud. And the voice of God is such a whisper that sometimes if you're not looking for it, you can't hear it. And that's a lot of times why I preach so much to get in your word and get in your Bible every day, because if you are seeking it, it's very hard for the devil to keep that hold on you. But most of us, when we are in one of those seasons, we're not in our Bible every day. We're not worshiping God because we don't feel like worshiping God, because we feel like crap about ourselves. And that's what the devil wants. The longer he can keep you away from it, the longer he has a hold on you. I saw this video yesterday, and it rocked me. It was so good. It was a preacher. He was standing on stage and he was holding one of those leashes that are retractable, where you can like let it go for so far and then you stop it, and it like holds right there, and then you can let it go and it'll suck back in. So he put it around somebody's wrist and he said, "I am Satan holding you basically by this leash, and you can have a relationship with God, and I will let you start walking." And so the guy starts walking, and he said, "But right there is where you stop, because you still have to let me have a little piece of you." And he's like, he's okay with you having a relationship with God if you still give him that piece of you, if he still has that control over you, because he knows you can't be into the fulfillment and the fullness of what God has for you when you are tied to him. And you don't recognize it as a stronghold when you're living in sin, because you're right there next to him. The leash isn't tight. You're stuck on him. You're right there next to him. And then as you start to know Christ and you start moving away and you start walking towards and entering a new room, then the leash obviously all of a sudden gets tight and you can't go, and it has become a stronghold on you. And you don't recognize that until you start trying to transition into the next season, until you start trying to go into what he has for you. And that was so powerful to me, because there's so many times in my life that he has, purified me and sent me through this process, and things that I once was totally fine with and did every day and had no issue with, or ways that I acted, things that I spoke, the way that I treated people, that was so normal to me, now all of a sudden feels really icky and really wrong, and like I need to get away from it, but I can't. And it's so wild that it is so complicated yet so simple. And we complicate it so much, and the devil likes to complicate it in our heads so much and make it seem like it's all us and it's all on us and it's God's fault, and it's and it's not. It's a battle between God and Satan doesn't want us getting closer to God, so he's going to tell us all the lies to keep it from happening. And it really just boils down to that. And it's just so crazy. It's so crazy when you really just start to pick it apart. And that's why I am thankful for all of these seasons that I've gone through feeling that way, because it's taught me all of these things. And it's taught me how to recognize my dad's voice from the devil's voice. And when I know that these feelings are good, and like, hey, this doesn't feel good, this isn't right, this isn't where I need to be right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Like, it's like you'll get in those seasons where he really wants you. And that's like, I talk about that with some of my friends, is like, the isolation. Like, really, I think in this whole time, I think the devil has really wanted me to really see it in a different manner, like, oh, your kids are gone, they left you, like, all these things. And it's like, no, that's not what happened. Like, they actually are great kids. And I mean, they're not kids, they're adults, but they're like great, and they're like Christians and all the things. But these lies get poured into your head of, did you do your best? Did you, all these things that question who you are. And I think those are the things that really just start to eat at you, especially when you're in a time of like isolation, where God's got you kind of separated from, from just set apart, focus on him, really give him all the time, all of your time, and like really just let him pour into you. And I think the enemy can be very strong. It's all mental, it's all like in your head, and he really attacks there. That's where he attacks. But it's just really, through my life, I've totally seen it, like through every season, really. I've seen him like really show up. And then I'm like, I can identify it now more at the age that I'm at now than I did when I was 20, Like I see it, I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, I know what he's trying to and it's funny because my anxiety and depression really started when I was really young, and I went through like this time of having like hypochondria. So I was like always like worried about my health. I was always like, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me. Like that's kind of how it started for me. And so in my teenage years, everything was wrong. Like I was always having problems and whatever. And so I started thinking, okay, well, then that kind of went into my married life. And I was like taking that to when I had kids and like all of that. And like my husband's like, what is going on? Like, why are you so worried about everything to do with that? Well, finally I literally was like, that's the enemy. Like he's literally trying to bring me down. So I literally like Lord and said, take this from me because I don't want to struggle with this anymore. Like it was so consuming of my life that I literally spent every waking minute. I swear it was like WebMD, like the doctor. Like I was like always like consumed with that stuff. But now that I look back on it, I'm like, what was I doing? Like that's just so weird. Like I would never do that now. But that was the season of life that I was in, and that's how the enemy decided to attack me. He decided that, well, I'm going to get into your head this way, and this is how I'm going to do it, or and then other seasons have been different, but it's crazy how he uses certain things in your life to really just attack, really. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, I noticed it. It's funny how as you get older you start to realize these things more and more. I think like with with time and age comes with more wisdom and just kind of like seeing it for what it is, and it's just always a struggle with the mental games that sometimes go on. But I don't know how some people do it that don't really have that focus on Jesus. Like I don't know
I've always
how
wondered
people
that. I don't
really
I don't get it.
cope with life. Like I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, that's a big one. It's like whenever I have the fears and the anxieties, that's exactly where I go. And I mean, I can say as younger years though, that's not always where I went. It was it was like, oh, I need to get like the next medication or the next this or the next that. And I'm not saying that those things are completely wrong. I'm just saying you should be giving that a chance first. Like really giving it over to him and just releasing it because he does do that. He takes it from you. So if you ask, he does take those fears and anxieties away. So just the devil in his games that he that he likes to play.
And he
But you know,
He does. He plays the same game over and over and over again with all of us. And that's what, is another thing to recognize is he doesn't have any
mhm,
new plays. He doesn't have any new skills. He's doing the same thing he's done for years and years and years and years with every single person. And he is not
mhm,
omnipresent. He can't hear our thoughts. He can tell us things. He can put thoughts into our head. And then the way that we react to them
mhm,
is dependent on us. And so when we react to them and he puts that thought in and then we speak on it, we are speaking curses towards that. Like we are speaking it into life. And so and that I learned this a couple months ago and it has helped me so much because I've learned that everything that comes out of my mouth has the power of it all. Everything that comes out of my mouth, I'm giving the devil for his own playground. And so if I'm walking around my house and I'm
mhm,
complaining about how much my kids are stressing me out and I'm complaining about my husband and he's not doing this and he's not doing that, what's the enemy going to do? He's going to start attacking me in those areas because he knows that's where I'm stressed right now. So my husband and I all of a sudden are in a fight. All of a sudden my toddler's screaming her head off, having the biggest hissy fit of her life. And I'm overwhelmed because I spoke it and I allowed him to have that play. Yet if I'm walking around in thankfulness and rejoicing, just like it says in the Bible, thank you, Lord, for these children. Thank you that you have given me a home to raise them in. Thank you that I have a husband that loves me and cares for me. And walking around in that mindset, not only are we a lot happier because we're focusing on the good in our life, but we're also
yeah,
not giving him anything to work off of. There's nothing there left. And so, and it's
Mhm.
funny how you were saying, you're entering this new season, you're trying to find your identity again. And God is showing you, hey, it's now time. I'm isolating you to find your identity with me. And the devil is attacking your identity. He's saying, well, I can't believe, or, you could have
Mhm.
done this better. You could have done this better. Now they're gone. What are you going to do? You've got nothing left. You've got all these voices coming in, and God's like, hey, no, this is exciting. This is the time where you get to focus on me again. And it's just me
Yeah.
and you don't have a bunch of distractions anymore.
Yeah.
And so, but it's so, just like, wow, when you see it that way and you see, yeah, okay, like he's building me right here, and for this reason, that's why the devil's coming in and attacking it. And the same way for, me in business
Yeah.
seasons I've walked through, attacks on my finances, and that's when God was trying to show up for my finances, or attacks on my marriage or my family, and then 2 weeks later we're sitting in church together. Like I see the pattern happen
Mhm.
over and over and over again in my life. And I see God continue to show up over and over and over again in my life. And I think that is why there is so much anxiety and depression and suicide and terrible things that happen, because those people don't know how to get rid of those feelings. I cannot imagine walking through life without Jesus and like having to deal with all of that on my own. I've been there, and I've felt miserable, and I was miserable,
Mhm.
and I let people walk all over me, and I made
Yeah.
terrible decisions, and I had no self-worth. I mean, I was not a good version of me, and yet this version of me is totally unrecognizable to that person. And I cannot imagine
Mhm.
going 60 more years on this earth feeling that way. And it's so sad. It's
Mhm.
so. That's why I'm doing podcasts, because I'm like, people need to know, like, there is so much more here than a book of rules that is trying to tell you that you can't do this and that. Like, it's not, it's so much more than that. And
Yeah.
it's life changing, and it's transforming, and it's not just so that you can get to heaven and not die in hell. It's so that you can live an abundant
Yeah.
life, and a life fulfilled, and have everything you've ever dreamed of, and and be happy and have peace, and truly feel like you've made it. That feeling we're all chasing, the next job, the next wife, the next husband, the next thing, the next whatever, like, it's just Jesus. It's just Jesus. That's all it is. Oh, this was
Yeah.
so wonderful
Yeah.
chatting with you, Audrey. I feel like this was so needed. I feel like people, need to hear this kind of stuff. And it's so great to hear it from a different perspective, and from a different season of life, because you have walked through a lot of this, and you are entering a new season now. And I'm excited to see how he moves for you. And I'm excited to see, how he shows up for you. Anything to add before we end this wonderful pod?
I kind of started like a Christian women's group myself, not doing podcasts, but like I have it on, it's on Facebook. So I would say if anybody wants to, like, we're doing like Bible studies and stuff. So if anybody would want to go to my Facebook, it's Audrey Herbruck, and you could look me up on Facebook. But yeah, I have a group on there that I'm just starting out, and just kind of like, just trying to like get connected with other women, other Christian women, and kind of like go through the Bible, and just talk about all those things. So if anyone's interested in that and wants to join that group, it's just a free membership, and yeah, we're
I
just starting
love
that out,
that.
and
That's
we'll see where that goes.
awesome.
I'm just excited for the season of life, and I'm just seeing like what it is that God has for me, and I know He has a plan. I know that without a doubt, because I've seen it in my life over and over again. I'm excited about it, and I really enjoyed getting to talk to you. I love talking to other Christian women that relatable. It's all
Yeah.
relatable, so it's cool to get to talk to other women, and I'm that's the kind of where I'm at in my season of life, is like really getting to know more people and getting to know more Christian women, and just really diving in. And even if I'm able to help like younger women, and just in any way that I'm able to kind of like pour into other people, like that's what I want to do. Like I feel like that's always kind of been my calling, but I definitely want to be there for people that struggle with the things that I've struggled with, because I know it's big out there, anxiety, depression, it's huge. And that's, I think, something that if I'm able to give any kind of like, help to anyone that's going through something like that, I want to be able to be that help. And I think God's called me to kind of to do that, and to share my testimony and my story, and of who I am, and all of that. So that's kind of, I think, what my next step in life and kind of season is kind of just showing up for other people and helping wherever I can, really. So.
Yeah. Man, well, I love that. I love it. I'm so excited for you. That's an amazing, amazing thing too. I'm gonna hop on there and join. I love that kind of stuff. I love community, and so many people I think come into this, a new version of Christianity or really falling in love with Jesus for the first time. And it's even if you grew up in church, something maybe you've never experienced before. I know that's how it was for me.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in church, and I fell in love with Jesus at 23, 24 years old, and it was never what I experienced growing up in church. It was so much different, and it has changed my life in so many ways. And so I'm with you. I want that for everybody. I want everybody to feel the sheer peace and joy that is loving Jesus, and that comes with loving Jesus, and how it really does get rid of all of it, all the chaos, all of it. And it's not that it never comes, it just makes it so much easier. It makes it so much easier. So, all right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to another episode of Heaven's Will Podcast. I hope you have an amazing Friday. Happy Friday. And we will see you all next week. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Heaven's Will Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the podcast grow. I hope you were encouraged by today's episode, and don't forget to tune in next week as we dive deeper into Heaven's Will together.